Officially, the vast majority of the history of the Emerald Empire of Rokugan has been one of peace. There have been violent military conflicts between the great clans, between the minor clans, and between the minor clans and the great clans, but most of these conflicts have not been classified as wars by the official historians. As a result, the Hantei dynasty, which lasted from the founding of the empire all the way up to Hantei the 39th in the 1120s, is regarded as the long reign of peace. But, as in all things, there are exceptions, and one clan has always been at war since the founding of the empire. But not with itself or with its neighbors, but with an enemy from without. And this clan comprises arguably the greatest warriors in all of Rokugan. For while the other great clans fight each other, or at least mortal foes, the Crab Clan fight monsters. As with all great clans, the Crab began with one of the 7 kami siblings of Hantei, the first emperor. In this case, Hida. Hida was the tallest and by far the physically strongest of the kami, towering over mortals and even his own siblings. He was also the first of them to be eliminated in the tournament of the kami to determine who would be first emperor of Rokugan, losing in the first round against his faster sister, Shinjo. Hida did not take his loss very well, and essentially went off on his own to throw a tantrum at himself. It was then that he was approached by the little sage, Shinsei, making Hida one of the first kami to come into contact with him. Shinsei told Hida that the reason that he'd lost is because he had relied entirely too much on his strength and had underestimated his sister's speed. By refusing to acknowledge his own weakness, Hida could never become stronger. After all, the only way to become stronger is to overcome one's weaknesses, and you can only start to overcome weakness by acknowledging it first. Hida recognized the wisdom of Shinsei's advice, and would use this teaching not only to become a greater warrior during the early years of the empire's founding, but also a better person. The new Emperor Hantei gave to his brother the southernmost lands of the empire to rule over, with the Scorpion clan to the north, the Crane to the east, and to the south of Crablands lay the hell-tainted wastes known as the Shadowlands. Like the rest of his siblings, Hida went on to found his own great clan, the Crab Clan. He acquired armies of peasants and samurai willing to pledge fealty to him, and, also like his siblings, he went and found himself a wife. In the southernmost corner of his realm, Hida discovered a palace made of rose marble. He also found a woman named Masako, who told him that the palace had once belonged to her family, but was now ruled by a giant, malevolent, and very hungry sea serpent called an Orochi. Every year, the Orochi demanded that the local human tribes sacrifice young maidens to appease its hunger, and Masako begged Hida to slay the monster and save them from its rule. However, a giant sea serpent would be a bit too big even for Hida to slay alone, and so the kami of the Crab Clan decided, once again reflecting on the advice of Shinsei, not to rely on his strength to win, but this time, his brains. Hida recalled, back in the days when he used to live in heaven before his father went mad, of one of the many supernatural realms called Sakaku, the realm of mischief, which was apparently adjacent to Tengoku, the heavens where he and his siblings had lived. Hida recalled that back in the day, his parents, the Lord Sun and Lady Moon, would acquire from that land a strange potion of rice wine, which addled the mind and dulled the senses. It's not explained how Hida acquired or how he recreated this brew, but he did, and for this he is credited with introducing sake to the mortal realm. When the time for the yearly sacrifice was due, Hida left out a huge vat of sake for the Orochi. The monster obligingly drank the sake, and then Hida and his followers sat upon the drugged monster and slew it. By this point, Hida had fallen in love with the beautiful Masako, and so after slaying the Orochi, he claimed her as his wife and named the castle Kyuden Masako in her honor. The marriage was a happy one, although Hida refused to teach his new wife how to fight, as he valued her for her gentleness as much as for her beauty. Eventually, the couple had a son named Hida Atarasi, who, like his father, one day grew up to be a great warrior. Alas, the peace and bliss did not last forever, for in year 33, the war with Fu Leng began, and since the Shadowlands were directly on the borders of the Crab Clan, Hida and his new family were very much at the forefront of the fighting. By the time the war with Fu Leng began, Hida was beyond question the greatest warrior in all of the empire. Insanely strong, clad in a suit of armor called ketsuen, meaning blood ties, and wielding a massive tetsubo, a giant spiked iron hammer with which he could slay a dozen enemies with a single swing. Stories abound of his incredible feats of strength, such as when he wrestled an oni barehanded, tearing the monster apart with only his fingernails and his teeth, or how he killed an ogre by strangling it with his bare hands. Some accounts claim that he once even confronted Fu Leng himself in single combat. Unlike his brother Akodo of the Lion Clan, who rejected the idea of kinslaying, Hida had no such scruples, and though Fu Leng ultimately survived the duel, it is said that the ninth Kami's blood so covered Hida's armor that it was turned permanently black. The only other noteworthy deed performed by the Crab Clan during the war with Fu Leng was the discovery and mercy shown to the Komori. Early in the war, as a means of denying Fu Leng any allies within the bounds of his new empire, Emperor Hante had ordered the expulsion or extermination of all humans who refused to obey the empire's laws and all non-human races within the empire. The Komori were one such non-human race, a group of shapeshifters who usually favored the form of bats. They were, in many ways, similar to the Kitsu, the lion-like shapeshifters that were almost wiped out by the Lion Clan, only for Akodo to recognize at the last minute that they weren't a threat and then absorb into the Lion Clan. Unlike Akodo, Hida recognized immediately that the Komori and their leader Unmei were of no threat to the Empire and were not evil servants of Fu Leng. However, he knew that his siblings might not understand that, and so insisted that the Komori flee across the ocean to a group of islands called the Islands of Spice and Silk off of the eastern coast. It was a gesture of mercy for which the Komori would long be grateful to the Crab Clan. Naturally, Hida would have eagerly gone with Shinsei when the little sage approached the Kami with his idea of 7 champions to confront Fu Leng. But when Shinsei insisted that only mortals could accomplish this task, Hida did not hesitate to put forward his son, Hida Atarasi, who was more familiar with the terrain of the Shadowlands than anyone and could guide the others safely to Fu Leng's fortress. Hida is said to have declared that if Shinsei will not have my strength or my arms, then he shall have my future. For his part, Atarasi seemed resigned to the idea that this mission would likely result in his death, saying that at least this way, his death would serve a purpose. Tragically, Atarasi's fatalism was all too justified. Although he did survive the Day of Thunder itself, along with Shinsei and the Scorpion Thunder Shosuro, they were pursued by a ravening horde of demons and monsters, and Atarasi sacrificed his life in order to allow the other two to escape with the Black Scrolls, which now contained the fragmented essence of Fu Leng. Alas for Hida, the tragedy did not end there. On the Day of Thunder, the very day when Atarasi was fighting against Fu Leng, and Hida was away fighting the denizens of the Shadowlands to the south, another group of monsters managed to make it to Kyuden Masako, the castle of Hida's beloved wife, and surround it. Masako had only 100 samurai to protect her, though they all died to a man in her defense. When the last warrior fell, Masako killed herself to avoid falling into the enemy's hands. When he received the news, Hida's grief is said to have been so immense that he forbade any further mention of his wife's name from that point onward. In the end, the war with Fu Leng was won and the empire was safe, but for Hida, who had lost both his wife and his only son, the triumph would have been very little comfort to him. That said, he would not let grief dissuade him from his duty, and when the Emperor Hante charged Hida and his clan with the protection of the Empire's borders from the Shadowlands, Hida swore that he would fight the Shadowlands and all its evil until the sun and moon themselves fell from the sky. Still, his misery was great, and his brother Togashi, the founder of the Dragon Clan, took pity upon Hida and decided to ask some real dragons for help. Now, dragons in Legend of the Five Rings are similar in concept to that of most Oriental dragons, more akin to gods than mythical beasts. Originally, in Legend of the Five Rings, there were 7. The Celestial Dragon, the Dragon of Fire, the Dragon of Air, the Dragon of Water, the Dragon of Earth, the Dragon of the Void, and the Dragon of Thunder. Despite the names, none of these dragons really represented elements so much as they represented ideals, concepts, and virtues. For example, the Dragon of Thunder stood for courage, strength, and the willingness of mankind to try and be more than what they are. More to the point, the Dragon of Thunder responded to Togashi's pleas and was so moved by Hida's grief that it took the form of a mortal woman. She went to Hida and declared her love for him, and a year later returned with a son, Hida Osanowo, who would one day succeed his father as champion of the Crab Clan. With the future of his dynasty now secured, Hida could devote all of his energies to the defense of the Empire, which makes about now the appropriate moment to talk about exactly what the Shadowlands are, what kind of monsters infest it, and how it poses such a threat to Rokugan. You see, way back at the dawn of the Empire, when the kami fell from the sky, most of them, including Hida and the future Emperor Hante, landed sedately in the realm of mortals. One of their brothers, however, Fu Leng, fell farther to the south and hit the ground so hard that he literally smashed a hole between planes of existence, traveling through the mortal realm down into Jigoku, the realm of hell. This created a sort of gateway between the two planes of existence, and more to the point, allowed for the corrosive energies of hell to spill out into the living world, perverting everything it touched. Most of the creatures that inhabit the Shadowlands are run-of-the-mill fantasy monsters, demonstrating that while Legend of the Five Rings is mostly Japanese-inspired fantasy, the creators of this IP were clearly not above swapping in stuff from other fantasies and cultures. For example, there are goblins and ogres in the Shadowlands, and they're pretty much what you would expect. Goblins are small, green, and cunning with pointy ears and faces, while ogres are big, mostly dumb, humanoid brutes. But you've also got all kinds of beasts that were essentially mutated by the corrupting taint of the Shadowlands. And then you have bizarre creatures like the Tsuno, who are basically ogres except bigger with more horns and tusks, and are smart enough to use magic. But perhaps the most infamous and dangerous denizens of the Shadowlands are Oni. Now, in real-world Japanese culture, Onis are basically just giant ogres with horns and big clubs. But here is an interesting detail. Japan, particularly in its writing, borrowed a lot of characters from the Chinese script, and the character used for Oni in Chinese refers to demons and evil spirits. And Oni in Legend of the Five Rings are more inclined towards the Chinese description of the character than the Japanese one. In many ways, Oni in Legend of the Five Rings are akin to demons in both the Chinese sense and in the Western tradition, malevolent spirits that can be summoned and named. The naming part is especially important, for without a name, an Oni cannot manifest itself in the mortal realm. But unlike summoning and controlling demons in traditional Western fantasy, the trick is not in discovering the demon's true name and thus gaining power over it. In Legend of the Five Rings, Oni are given names by their summoners. The summoner doesn't have to give up his or her own name for the task, but it is preferred that the name be given willingly. And unsurprisingly, it's very difficult to find someone who would be willing to give up his or her own name just to bring about the manifestation of an evil demon. Once summoned, an Oni has a symbiotic bond with its summoner. It must obey its master's commands and even takes on some aspects of its master's personality, but eventually, the Oni will try to rebel and assert its own freedom. As a result, any Shugenja crazy or corrupted enough to try and summon an Oni must maintain an incredible force of will. This is made awkward by the fact that the longer the relationship between the Oni and its master, the more the master will eventually succumb to taint, the more his or her will weaken, and the stronger the Oni becomes. As you might have guessed by now, Oni can be summoned by anyone trained in the magic arts. However, these are generally considered to be weak, especially compared to the majority of Oni from the Shadowlands, which were created directly by Fu Leng himself, drawing upon the evil essences of Jigoku. Oni can shapeshift, use various magical abilities, and of course spread the Shadowland taint wherever they go, making them especially formidable. But perhaps the greatest danger of the Shadowlands is the taint itself. In many ways, the taint is like nuclear fallout, and going through the Shadowlands is like walking through an irradiated zone. The longer you stay in the Shadowlands, the more likely that you will become tainted. If you are unlucky enough to have open wounds in the Shadowlands, you are almost guaranteed to become tainted. Initially, the taint manifests as a kind of illness, the victim becoming pale, sweaty, and sickly. Then, the victim becomes increasingly short-tempered and paranoid, more likely to lash out at perceived insults. Untreated, the mental deterioration and emotional instability only gets worse from here. And much like the chaos corruption in Warhammer 40k, advanced stages of the taint will often manifest in the form of physical deformities and mutations. The ultimate end result of falling prey to the taint is either complete mental insanity or falling totally under the sway of Jigoku and becoming possessed of the desire to corrupt and destroy everything that you once held dear. Such tainted men who fall under the sway of the Shadowlands are referred to as the Lost. Even the dead are not spared from the taint. If you are unfortunate enough to die in the Shadowlands, and your head is not quickly removed from your body, or your body is not burnt, then you will likely be resurrected by the taint as a zombie. The only substance that can enable men to resist the taint is Jade, which is believed to have been formed from the tears that Amaterasu, the lady's son and mother of the kami, shed the day that her husband went mad and tried to devour her children. A single piece of jade the size of a man's finger can guarantee protection from the taint for 1 week, as the jade itself will absorb the taint, eventually becoming black and soft, eventually turning into obsidian, at which point it loses all efficacy. This was the threat from which Hida had to defend the Empire. And by now he knew that as great a warrior as he was, he could not do this alone. He had armies that would follow him, and a wife and son to ensure his legacy, but what he needed now were captains, close advisors whom he could rely upon and share his burden with him. And so, after the war with Fu Leng, Hida gathered together all the fighting men and women of the Crab Clan and demanded, "Who among you is worthy to stand with me and bear my burden?" Only 3 men answered the Kami's challenge. Hiruma had served as a scout during the war with Fu Leng. Swift of foot and keen of eye, he was said to be able to identify the size of a distant army at a single glance, and was often known as the Hunter of 1,000 Hares. Kaiu was a craftsman of great renown, famed as a maker of armor and weapons and as a builder of ships, while Kuni was a young man who had recently learned the arts of Shugenja from the Phoenix clan. All 3 proclaimed themselves worthy to stand by Hida's side, and so Hida set for them a task to prove themselves. Although Fu Leng himself was defeated, he had left behind many strong lieutenants, and one of these was a monster known as Hatsu Tsuru no Oni. Slay the monster, and Hida would deem them worthy. With that, the 3 men decided to work together to accomplish the task. Hiruma, with his superlative tracking skills, found the perfect location to trap the Oni. Meanwhile, Kuni and Kaiu studied one of the scales of Hatsu Tsuru no Oni in order to formulate the best way to defeat it. By examining the essence of the Oni scale, Kuni was able to devise the perfect binding spell to paralyze Hatsu Tsuru no Oni. Kaiu's studies led him to conclude that a steel blade would be useless against the hide of Hatsu Tsuru no Oni, and instead created a sword whose steel was laced with holy jade, enabling the sword to pierce the Oni's flesh. And so the 3 men put their plan into motion. Hiruma lured the Oni into the trap, Kuni bound it with his spell, and Hiruma, wielding Kaiu's sword named Chikara, or Power, struck off the Oni's head with his own hands. They presented the head to Hida, and when the Kami asked to whom he should give the credit for slaying the Oni, each of the men claimed one of the others should get the credit. Hiruma said that without Kaiu's sword, he could never have slain the Oni. Kaiu argued that without Kuni's spell, his sword would have been useless. Of course, Kuni said that Hiruma had cut the Oni's head off himself and had also run the greatest risk by luring the monster into the trap. Impressed by their character, Hida elevated all 3 men to the rank of daimyo, allowing them to create their own samurai families. At a single stroke, the Crab Clan went from having only 1 samurai family to having 4. That 4 would later become 5 when the Crab Clan acquired the allegiance of the Yasaki family following a war with the Crane Clan. But before we go into the families, let's first talk about the Crab Clan in general and how it relates to the other great clans of Rokugan. Because theirs is a way of life that revolves around war, vigilance, and pragmatism, the Crab Clan are very outspoken and blunt in their speech. This is awkward for them because such qualities aren't exactly welcome in the imperial court, which revolves around etiquette, courtesy, and ritual. The crab disdains such things as useless and impractical, preventing others from doing what must be done. Because of their proximity to the Shadowlands and its myriad supernatural horrors, the crab are also the most superstitious of the great clans, and are quick to see omens and portents everywhere, behavior that the other clans have little patience for. Of all the great clans, the crab enjoy the closest ties with the unicorn. Firstly, because the crab respect strength above all else, and the unicorn have quite frankly the best cavalry in all of the empire. Second, because of all the foreign customs the unicorn ended up adopting during their 800 years of wandering outside of the empire, they are as much outsiders as the crab often are, and like the crab have little patience for the rituals and etiquette of the court, making the two great clans essentially kindred spirits. With the next three clans, the lion, the dragon, and the phoenix, it's a little more complicated. The crab respect the lion for their military skill, but often butt heads with the right hand of the emperor over the issue of honor and loyalty. To the lion, the code of honor and loyalty to the emperor are everything. The crab, while not disparaging honor like the scorpion do, believe that both it and loyalty should have their limits. The crab remained loyal to the Hante dynasty for over 1,000 years because the first Hante had won the tournament of the Kami, thus proving that he was the strongest and most worthy to rule. Whether the crab intended it to be this way or not, this belief made it easy for the other great clans, especially the lion, to pick up on the unspoken corollary. That should the crab clan deem the emperors weak or unworthy, they may choose to renounce their loyalty and even go so far as to try and take over the empire for themselves. After all, the crab value strength above everything, and in their eyes at least, they are the strongest. As for the Phoenix clan, again the crab values strength, and the Phoenix clan are the strongest magic users in the empire. Also, though not as outspoken as the unicorn, the Phoenix are also more willing than others to speak their minds, and honesty and frankness are an easy way to a crab's heart. On the other hand, the crab often disparage the Phoenix for their commitment to pacifism, but otherwise the two have never really had any conflicts with one another, partly because the two clans have such radically different interests from one another, and partly because both clans are so geographically isolated from one another. When it comes to the Dragon Clan, relations between them and the Crab become especially complicated. For the most part, the Crab Clan greatly respect the samurai families of the Dragon Clan. The Mirumoto for their skill as swordsmen, the Kitsuki for their honesty and integrity as courtiers and administrators, and the Kuni family have especially close ties with the Dragon Clan's Shugenja family, the Agasha. But the Dragon Clan aren't really led by the samurai families. They are instead led by the various monastic orders of the clan. Monastic orders that would rather spend their days meditating on enlightenment. And the Crab Clan utterly despise the monks of the Dragon Clan. You see, to the crab, death in battle is the kindest fate that they could ever ask for, because you are dying while doing your duty to the clan and to the empire. To the crab, monastic life is a fate fit only for those who are too old and weak to fulfill their duty. As such, the only monks to be found among the Crab Clan are those that are either physically infirm or mentally ill. Most crab who do live long enough to retire from active service become teachers, in this way allowing them to serve their clan by passing on their knowledge and experience to the younger generation. Unsurprisingly, the crab both mistrust and dislike the Scorpion Clan, whom they see as underhanded and untrustworthy. But of course, if there is one great clan that the crab hate above all others, it is the Crane Clan. To the crab, the Crane Clan are the antithesis of everything that they themselves represent. The crab as a people are hard-headed, warlike, pragmatic, and bluntly spoken. They value strength above all else and consider their duty to the empire to be the most important thing in their lives. And they are willing to do or say anything that will help them fulfill that duty. The Crane, on the other hand, are known for their fastidiousness, their eloquence, their artistry. They are the architects of the imperial court, which the crabs see as a den of honeyed words, silken lies, and deceit. In the eyes of the crab, the crane are not strong, either in military might like the crab themselves, or the lion or the unicorn clans, nor in magic like the phoenix. Even the scorpion and dragon clans are considered more dangerous than the crane as far as the crab are concerned, and yet the crane are the richest clan in all of Rokugan. They have the best agricultural land. They control almost the entire east coast and have a monopoly on trade. They occupy the exalted position of left hand of the emperor, and because almost every Hante emperor has taken as a wife a woman of the Crane clan, the Crane possess great influence over the imperial family. To the crab, all of these honors and privileges of the Crane were gained not through struggle and honest battle, but through manipulation and underhanded dealings. In other words, the Crane occupy a privileged position which they do not deserve. The only exception to this rule is the Daidoji family, who are considered more practical and straightforward than the rest of the Crane. The Crab clan like to claim that this is because the founder of the family, Doji Hayaku, took as wife a woman of the Crab clan. With all this in mind, it should come as no surprise that in the year 400, the Crab were feeling especially smug towards the Crane. They had just beaten them in a war, acquired the allegiance of one of the Crane's families, the Yasaki family, and managed to swipe some Crane territory for themselves, something for which the Crane would remain eternally bitter. With that, we finally turn to the families of the Crab clan, beginning with the Yasaki family. You see, for as much as the Crab clan despise the imperial court and its politics, they really can't afford to ignore it. Because of their proximity to the Shadowlands, the lands of the Crab clan are very barren and rocky and devoid of natural resources, or at the very least in the kind of quantities that the Crab armies need in order to maintain themselves and their vigil over the southern border. Because of this, they have to deal with the rest of the empire in order to get resources, which in turn means negotiation, which in turn means the court. Fortunately, the Yasaki family, being former Cranes, are very, very good at court politics and smooth talk and negotiations. As a result, the Yasaki family are very much the courtiers of the Crab clan. They handle matters at the court so that the rest of the clan doesn't have to. They also make for excellent merchants, and though the Crab clan has never been as wealthy as the Crane, thanks to the Yasaki, they've been able to acquire more wealth than they otherwise would have. In many ways, the role of the Yasaki family is perhaps one of the most important ones. With their negotiation skills and good heads for business, the Yasaki ensure that everything that the Crab clan needs gets to it in a timely manner. Timber and stone for the maintenance of fortifications, food to feed the armies, as well as the steel and jade needed to arm them against the monsters of the Shadowlands. But not all trade by the Yasaki is on the up and up. The Yasaki are especially fond of smuggling, something that the other clans, particularly the Crane, take great exception to, but with the Crab clan protecting the Yasaki, there's not much the other clans can do about it. Meanwhile, the Hiruma family, much like its namesake founder, serve as scouts and spies for the Crab clan. They are experts at reconnoitering and masters of camouflage, able to blend into their environments with ease and spy upon their enemies without them noticing. It is often said that Hiruma scouts have the stamina of a horse, and are often used by the Crab to deliver messages. Hiruma himself continued to serve Hida loyally and faithfully, and one day gifted to his lord the sword Chikara that he had used to behead the Oni. Hida accepted his vassal's gift, and so Chikara would become the ancestral sword of the Crab clan, wielded by every clan champion ever since. Then there's the matter of the Kuni family. With most Shugenja families among the great clans, their duty is relatively simple. Study and practice their magic in case they should ever need to use it in their clan's service. The Kuni do this as well, but they have a far more important task. Because the Shadowlands is as much a supernatural threat to the Empire as a physical one, the important role of the Kuni family is to study the Shadowlands and its denizens in order to find the best ways of defeating them. As such, Shugenja of the Kuni family are as much scientists and researchers as they are magicians. They collect all reports of the Shadowlands from the Hiruma scouts that venture within, and whenever the dead body of a monster can be brought back to Crab Lands, the Kuni almost always claim the corpse for study and examination. The Kuni are also the ones charged with protecting the Crab Clan from the effects of the taint. As such, most of their magic spells focus on warding and purification. They create spells that are meant to protect their fellow crab from the taint as much as they can, as well as trying to come up with methods that might cure those afflicted by the taint. The Kuni obsession with studying their enemies can be traced back to its namesake founder. Kuni dedicated his life to studying the Shadowlands and its myriad threats so that he could find the best ways to defeat it, and in fact would make great discoveries concerning the properties of Jade and its ability to protect against corruption. Tragically, these discoveries were the product of many of Kuni's research trips into the Shadowlands. These regular exposures to the Shadowland taint and his delving into knowledge best left hidden would eventually drive the founder of the Kuni family insane. He would often return from his research expeditions crazed and feverish, and often had to be confined to his bed for weeks on end. Inevitably, he was driven mad by his research and had to be confined to his chambers. One day, however, his children and followers entered his bedroom only to find that Kuni was gone. The only thing that was left of him was a pile of research papers upon which he had scrawled many, many notes. Because of this, he is remembered by his family and the Crab Clan as a great hero, who dedicated his all to serving his clan even at such personal cost to himself. On the other side of the coin, Nietzsche's old quote about bewaring those who fight monsters holds true for the Kuni family as well. One infamous early case was that of the 2nd century Kuni Shugenja Kuni Nakanu. He was arguably the first to identify the nature of the Shadowlands taint and was certainly the first to actively study it, particularly the taint's effects on human corpses, which resurrected them as zombies. He hoped that through his study of the taint, he could use it to control the undead, thus turning a potent weapon of the Shadowlands against it. Unfortunately, these experiments came back to literally bite him. One day in the year 105, according to the Ikoma histories, one of Kuni's experiments went wrong, he was bitten by one of the zombies he was trying to control, and his facilities were completely destroyed, releasing all the other zombies trapped within, which then went on to rampage throughout Crab Lands. Ironically, but fittingly, Nakanu himself arose from the dead as a zombie under the sway of the Shadowlands. Because of this, despite the extensive information he was able to accrue about the Shadowlands and the taint, the name of Kuni Nakanu is regarded with loathing by the entire Crab Clan to this day. Then there is the Kaiu family, who serve as siege masters and armorers of the Crab Clan. They are responsible for making and maintaining the weapons and armor that the armies of the Crab use against their enemies. Perhaps the most famous example of this is Fukutsu, Indomitable, a suit of armor created by Kaiu himself for his lord Hida. The armor was famous for being incredibly resistant to the taint. However, the Crab Clan champions would favor the use of Ketsuen, Hida's original armor, until it was lost 1,000 years later during the Clan Wars. Only then would Fukutsu officially become the ancestral armor of the Crab Clan. But by far the greatest feat of the entire Kaiu family's history is the Carpenter's Wall, a massive fortification that extends across the entirety of the southern Crab border, cutting off the Shadowlands from the Emerald Empire. Essentially, it's the Great Wall of China, Legend of the Five Rings style. The Carpenter Wall is described as being over 100 feet tall, and that's not counting the many hundreds of feet worth of foundations beneath the soil. The battlements are 30 feet thick at their narrowest point, and the entire wall maintains a constant garrison of over 150,000 samurai and is stockpiled with enough rations to feed the whole army for 2 years. The Kaiu are master military engineers and leave nothing to chance. Every 50 yards along the wall is a strong point that also serves as a supply depot for siege engines and the crews to maintain them. There are hundreds of sentry towers along the wall's length, including the 12 great Kaiu towers, which allow a sentry to see for many miles. Communications along the wall are maintained by an elite set of Hiruma runners known as the Falcon's Wings for their great speed. The Falcon's Wings essentially operate in relays, each runner able to sprint an entire mile, then handing off his message to the next. The Kaiu have also constructed a series of mazes, dead ends, and traps beneath the foundations of the wall, just in case any Shadowland monster feels tempted to try and go under it. Apart from Otosan Uchi, the great imperial capital, the Carpenter Wall is arguably the greatest architectural and engineering feat in the entirety of the Emerald Empire. But a mighty wall is only half of a good defense. The other half are those who man the wall, which of course brings us finally to the Hida family, the rulers of the Crab Clan. The Hida family is by far the largest family of the Crab Clan, and their samurai make up the vast majority of the soldiers who man the walls and fight in the crab armies. In many ways, the Hida are the central focus of the Crab Clan, with the other four families serving as a support network for them. The Hiruma scouts provide tactical information, the Kuni support the Hida with their magic, the Kaiu maintain the armor and weapons and the siege fortifications, and the Yasaki make sure that the crab armies receive the resources they need. But when it comes to actually going to war, all of the other families defer always to the Hida. Every child of the Hida family is raised from birth with the understanding that they are to bear the burden of defending the empire's borders, thus instilling in them the value of doing one's duty no matter the cost to themselves. More than any other family of the Crab Clan, the Hida family best represent the stereotype of the brash, rude, straight-talking crab warrior, who has no time for niceties and doesn't care who he offends. Just as their namesake founder, Hida, was unusually large and strong, so too the sons and daughters of Hida's descendants are also large and unusually strong for their size. Women of the Hida family are noted for being unusually tall and muscular, able to look down even on most men, while the men of the family are veritable giants and muscled like Greek statues. Because of their more than human size and strength, the warriors of the Hida family can wear thicker, heavier armor than any other warrior, granting them that much more protection in battle. This is also reflected in the kind of weapons they choose to wield. Despite being members of the samurai class like everyone else, you very rarely see a Hida samurai wielding a katana in battle. The katana is believed to be the soul of the samurai. As such, the warriors of the Crab Clan are reluctant to expose these weapons to the dangers and the taint of the Shadowlands. As a result, the Hida treat their swords more as a symbol of their status as samurai than as weapons. When they go to war against the creatures of the Shadowland, they prefer large, heavy, two-handed weapons, the kind large and heavy enough to pierce thick armored hide, pulp flesh, and reduce skulls and bones to powder. Broadswords, falchions, battle axes, halberds, and especially spiked warhammers. Essentially, the Hida are like the guys from Monster Hunter, only with slightly less oversized weapons. As for Hida himself, although he did his duty faithfully and came to love his new wife and son, he never quite got over the loss of his first wife and his first son, Atarasi. He eventually stepped down in the year 63, allowing his son Osanowo to rule in his stead, and in the year 210 set off into the Shadowlands to discover what had become of Atarasi once and for all. The official Ikoma histories mark this as the day of Hida's death. According to certain secret accounts, however, Hida did eventually find his son, only to discover that Atarasi had been fully infected by the taint after his death and was resurrected as an Aku Tenshi, a super powerful zombie that essentially works like a Death Knight from World of Warcraft. According to these secret accounts, the duel between father and undead son lasted for 1,000 years, until finally Hida emerged victorious, striking down his son with one final blow of his Tetsubo. Before he succumbed to the wounds inflicted on him in their terrific duel, Hida prayed to his mother, Amaterasu, the lady's son, begging her to save the soul of Atarasi from damnation and torment. Amaterasu answered Hida's plea and turned the spot upon which father and son had dueled into a massive volcano known as Amaterasu's Furnace. To this day, it remains the only spot in the Shadowlands completely purified of the taint. Thus died Hida, who had outlived all of his other siblings, the last of the Kami. But he had left behind a powerful legacy. His descendants would lead the Crab Clan for generations to come, and the clan that he had founded would forever stand vigilant against the darkness. Indomitable, unbroken, unfailing, dedicated to their duty like no other clan in all of the Emerald Empire. So long as even a single crab samurai stands, so stands Rokugan.